Okay. How's it going? Camera is very close to my face. I'm still working on the camera setup for this. Not real impressed with the camera. You can see it's like zooming in and out a bit, and lighting is way blown out. But probably in the next like couple weeks, we'll make some changes, at least to the lighting, and eventually to the camera. I just got the camera kind of like better, but maybe if the lighting is better, let me see if this light comes on. Maybe that makes it better. No, it's more blown out. Then maybe uh, we can adjust the lighting with this thing now. See here. Is that a little better? Yeah, that's actually quite a bit better. Nope, that's not what I wanted. Okay. Wow. Okay. We'll work on it, guys. Life is a work in progress. But I wanted to talk about some awesome things, but look at this, by the way. This is my phone charger that I got. Look at how entertaining this is. Watch this, actually. Wait. Look at that. So this charger has like, light in fiber optics that goes through it, and how charged your phone is dictates the speed of the spiral at which it's moving. So my phone's pretty dead, so this is moving pretty fast. But as the phone gets more charged, it looks like the current slows down. It's very, very cool, and it's super cheap on Amazon. I'm not paid to say that. I don't know even what brand it is or anything, but for like an extra $2, you can get some entertainment from your phone charger. So I want to talk about a lot of things tonight. One of them is skepticism. I continued. I just noticed, though, that Brian Keating just uploaded 40 minutes ago a talk with Eric Weinstein and Michael Shermer, who is the founder and editor-in-chief, I think, of Skeptic magazine or whatever. I don't know. And I'm gonna watch that, and then sorry, started to double up the sound, but I'm gonna watch that. We're gonna talk about it next week. So we're gonna dive even deeper into skepticism, but we're gonna talk a little bit about it today because we're gonna talk about thinking and some things that I have noticed. One of the fascinating things that we're going to talk about a little bit, we're going to dive into this guy's story, is a man who had a head injury and became like a math genius. Now, I don't like to call people a genius, because really genius is an idea, and everybody has genius ideas. And foolish, essentially, the opposite of genius, is also an idea and or an action. And everybody has foolish ideas and actions as well, just like everybody who has genius ideas and actions. But we have this arbitrary system where we picked a random arbitrary IQ, and we're like, yeah, that's genius. It's like if a guy has a 180 IQ and has a PhD in physics, but never actually discovers anything that's true, and everything that he does propose ends up being fundamentally wrong, not just like not quite there, but like fundamentally wrong. Is he physics genius? No, obviously not. So like we can't really call that guy a physics genius. Not, we're not saying, he's not bright, but it's just like, can't really call him a physics genius if you're being honest about Stephen Hawking. And I do think that we have kind of like a bit of an idol worship of Stephen Hawking. And I don't think he was as good at physics as we think. But I don't think you can be that great at physics and be like an atheist. I mean, maybe you can call yourself an atheist, but you can't actually be like, you can't not understand that you are not, you would, if you're that good of a physicist, you would understand that we are inside of a mind. And if you don't understand that, then you are not as good of a physicist as, is actually needed to really understand the fundamental nature of the universe, like at all, because it is a mind. So let's look at this now. So there was a man, and this was shared by Robert Grant. His name was Jason Paget, and he was the author of a book called Struck by Genius. And he had very little interest in academics, like me, and he developed the ability to visualize complex mathematical objects and physics concepts intuitively after head injury. The injury, while devastating, seems to have unlocked part of his brain that makes everything in his world appear to have a mathematical structure. I don't know how a head injury causes you to do that. I'm not saying it's impossible. Just don't know. But I had this happen to me. But I wasn't hit in the head. And so I don't think that it's necessarily him being hit in the head that caused his new abilities. I don't think that it is about having like just abilities that nobody else has, and you can just see the code of the matrix as you walk around. And I will say, sometimes when you learn the pattern that is essentially the theory of everything that we discuss, with the 2 degrees of freedom and 1 intrinsic constraint and 720 degrees of rotation, which is just 2 360s, one within the next, like, and you understand that this is all the various aspects of this. It is kind of like you can see the code of reality when you're looking around, because you know what to expect, even in a new thing, but you're not seeing, numbers. You're just like, yeah, I mean, if everything follows the same pattern, so, if this follows that pattern, then there should also be this aspect to this thing that I'm just now, like, investigating. And then, if you're right, then you go and look and it's there. But it's just the ability to make predictions. It's not that your world looks like the Matrix. And I was listening to Eric Weinstein being interviewed by this guy they were talking about, like, music, and he was like, what's it like to be, this good at math, and how can you use that and to help you play guitar and stuff. And the guy was like, I just picture in my head that you just understand math so well that you just understand the laws of the universe so much better than everybody else, and therefore gives you like a cheat code to learning music and everything like that. And if you look, it does appear like it does do that, but it's not like how that guy pictured it in his head. Is like, it's just like these shapes and geometries and numbers in people's minds, and like that is just like, what's happening. And it's possible that this guy who hit his head is having that happen. I think I've heard of, people who were either, autistic or, quote unquote, whatever that means, or they did have an injury where all of a sudden they kind of got like a synesthesia type of deal going on. And that is kind of an interesting and relevant perspective to this. And I, as somebody who's like, I will say, I've never been diagnosed with dyslexia. But I'm so bad at spelling that there's something going on there with that's similar, at least, to what that phenomenon is usually described as. And while I think that it does impede your ability to take directions and just go through and be like told this is first, second, third, fourth, just do it. Don't even worry about the context, just do it. It does impede your ability to do that so easily, and it did impede me in academics and education. It's also a superpower when it's in the right context, because context is key to understanding anything. And that what that is it is like it is a necessity to see the various parts of a whole and their interactions with each other. And that dog. And then this is necessary to kind of like making discoveries of objective patterns in like the theory, the patterns in the theory of everything. Meta-mathematics, as we unfortunately might have to call it, because metaphysics, even though it's a much better term, has so much stigma around it, and I'm still debating on whether or not to call this. I've been calling it objective mathematics, meta-mathematics, metaphysics. I think metaphysics is the best term for it. Or you could just call it, I don't know, info mathematics or something, information mathematics. Mental math almost, but it's like, it's not enough. Like metaphysics or mental physics, I guess, is probably like pretty good, is the physics of information processing. It is the structure of information processing and forces and information and the patterns that organize it all. We don't have a term for this anymore. It was called metaphysics, and then science destroyed it, the term, which sucks because it's like astrology used to be and probably would be actually much more accurate and like seen for the legitimate to be legitimate if it was placed into the correct context. I'm not saying I know what that context is, and I don't know who does exactly, but I think that there is truth to it, and it makes perfect sense when you understand reality that there would be something like that. And even Leonardo da Vinci and all these other people who we think of as the greatest minds in human history, they all believed in stuff like that. Like, I think Da Vinci had used to read the Zohar, which is into, it's Jewish metaphysics, and just it's linked to astrology and all kinds of stuff. And like, you're gonna say that you're smarter than him now because it's like the 21st century, and like he was just a fool. It's like, no. Like, people were smarter back then than they are now. And I just think we've lost context of many of these things. So instead of astrology, now we have astronomy. And instead of cosmology, now we have, we have cosmology, but it's not thought of the way cosmos used to be thought of, which was the cosmos was thought of as like where the body of God, which it is. But we don't think about it like that, even if we'll say terms like that. It's thought of as a dust ball, and it's not a dust ball the way that you think of a dust ball as just being an inanimate, non-sentient being. It's not. It's a mind, and it's sentient and it's animated. Obviously, it's animating because you're animated and you're part of it. But terms are important, and they matter. But this guy, though, let's look at, I'm going to share my screen. What's his name? Paget. Let's see here. Dang, my internet is slow today. Getting an upgrade for it, by the way. That is like kind of a necessity. Struck by genius. I'm going to show you something amazing. And how I can tell this guy is legit. And then I'm legit in this too. So, Jason Pack. Okay. Here you go. This guy, right here. The violent attack that turned a man into a math genius. Jason Paget had struggled as a student and had spent his professional life working at his father's shop. Following a mugging outside a bar in 2002, he became agoraphobic. And during that time at home, he developed an unprecedented passion for learning. And let's go on a bit more wiki. Maybe there's a Wikipedia. Wiki data. Okay, he has a TED Talk, How Math Saved My Life. Interesting. After a head injury, he developed, among other things, a fascination with mathematically generated imagery and newfound love of learning. Personal theory of math, fractals, and everything. Interesting. I wonder what his theory is. We're gonna have to look. I'm gonna have to look at that later, but yeah, that's it. Okay, this is him. So you see this structure. He made this. Okay, this is his art. Looks familiar, right? Look at this. Dang. Planck spacetime. Looks like the cosmological verse. Just for context. Look at that next to this. Dang. And by the way, guys, I failed Algebra 2 twice. Almost failed Algebra 1. Failed, well, I had to drop my probability class in college and then took it the next semester and actually did my math homework for the first time in my life. I was good at geometry in high school, but then when I tried to do probability in college, when I actually did my math homework for the first time, I was so good, guys. And I had failed at the first semester. I failed the first test, failed the second test, and dropped it, or withdrew. And I'm not joking. This is like a real story. I've told some of it before. Like, went from failing math to being so good that I was better than TA. And there was one instance where we were studying. I went in for a test study session because this was like a semester where I decided I actually wanted to see how good I could do in school because I had done well on something and I wanted to kind of extend it. So I really committed like for about a year to just like doing very well in school, and I did very well in school. But I did my homework for the first time in my life. I never did my homework when I failed algebra in high school. And when I say never, I mean not one. That is not an exaggeration, and which is why I failed. And because I actually did do okay on the tests. I didn't do great, but I did okay. But I never did a single math homework assignment ever. I hated homework, but especially that. And I did my math homework for the first time though in college, and there was a study session that I went to for one of the tests, and the guy would put this marble problem on the board, and he finished writing the problem out, and then he turned to like the class to talk about how to solve the problem, and I just like raised my hand, and he was like, "Yep," and I was like, "The answer's 3," and he was like, "You can't know that," and I was like, "Yeah, I can." And he was like, "No, you can't," and I was like, "Yeah, I can because this and this and this and this," and I like explained how mentally in my head I had seen it, and he just like looked at it and just looked at the paper, and like he knew the answer before he made the problem, and he just like wrote how to solve it out, and then just wrote equals 3, and then he just erased it, and then just pulled up another problem. And he was like clearly annoyed because he was a math major and I wasn't, and I think that's why, at least, like, I mean, if you say to somebody you can't know that, then like that's what I'm assuming. Like, he was clearly annoyed. I will say that he wasn't like, "That's awesome." He was like pissed, and he didn't even say anything really to me about it, other than "You can't know that." And then also, I once, for my first test in the class, I had yet to get, like, my history was that I had withdrawn the previous semester, and I got my wisdom teeth pulled, and I missed the first test in the semester that I had decided I was going to study and do really well on everything, or try to at least. And I had to take the test later, but the people had already gotten their tests back and graded before I was given mine, just because of the timing and how quickly the turnaround time was on it, which was crazy. And I went to go take the test, and the makeup test, and on the last, I knew I had gotten every question right, not because I cheated, but because I really studied on how to do it, and I just knew every question was right. And on the last one, I was going to answer it as correct, and then I was afraid that they would think that I had cheated, and I started answering the question, and then I just like didn't finish answering it and just put a question mark. And then later, the next test I got an A, and then the next test I got an A, and like it made sense, that I had missed one question only. It would have made sense I missed no questions if they had previously seen those other tests, but they did not ever see those other tests. So I didn't want to just raise suspicions and that first time around. And so basically, if I can do that, then math isn't off limits to some people or most people, and then just freely available to everybody. It is a combination of obviously hard work, and how hard you have to work is dependent upon natural, abilities. But there is another component to this that is totally overlooked, and people are like, "Yeah, it's a combination between your hard work and your abilities." It's not just that, and that's the most important part of this is your perspective. And it is my perspective shift that caused me to be able to understand this. Like I've said before, Chris Langan's CTMU, his Cognitive Theoretic Model of the Universe, was something that semester that I did well in school. I tried to understand his CTMU. Couldn't even understand the name. I had a theophany, number of years ago, and kind of just started to be able to like visualize how physics worked, and like it just made sense, and why you can't go faster than light, and like all these other things that I was able to make predictions on that then ended up proving to be true when I looked them up. And then I was like, "Oh, I wonder, like that guy who I looked up, like the smartest man in the world, like let's go look up his theory, maybe I'll understand it." And I was like, "I bet I will." I understood Cognitive Theoretic Model of the Universe. He's saying the universe is a mind. And as soon as I read that, I was like, "Yep, I get it." And I've looked more into it. Here is actually, or oh well, I thought I had some of his books here, but I haven't read them yet. But I did order them, and but what I've spoken to him a little bit on like uh, mess and like Facebook conversations, and like CTMU is very similar to my work. I have yet to really find a difference, but I also haven't delved that deep into it. But from what I've seen and the interview that I listened to him on a philosophy interview, everything he said there I agreed with. And, you know, the periodicity of sentience is the only thing that I've never heard of anybody else say that is part of my work. That, and it's not the only thing, but it's a very specific key component that would be easy to recognize in somebody else's work. And I haven't seen it, which is odd. But is that the horse farmer guy? Yes, he's a horse farmer guy. I heavily rejected math knowledge growing up. I thought it was menial and beneath me. I mean, it is, though, the way they teach it. The way they teach it, it's irrelevant to you. It's just, can you memorize how to do this recipe and the steps of, first you had this much sugar and then you had this much salt. It's like, it's just a memorized recipe. And that is how I always was like, this is useless, So, and like you have to put things into context in order to understand them. Like horse farmers are way more successful, productive, profitable, whatever you want to call it, than gecko breeders. Yes, they are. Yes, but some gecko breeders are very, very good. But here's the thing about breeding like snakes or lizards or birds or fish is that you have to produce, or probably anything else, what people want to buy, and what can maximize your like return, not what you want to keep. So if you have some desire to keep some weird horse or some weird lizard that nobody else cares about, then you're not going to be that good luck turning it into a business. You have to also do the things that everybody else cares about. But what's fascinating, though, let's get back to this guy, is look, obviously this right here, wow, super, super close. Ridiculously close, actually. Ridiculously close. So ridiculously close. But even more, that looks like E8. Wave particle duality. I mean, this guy is a genius at math, like, and physics. But this is how I see this stuff too. Like, and what's interesting is that he had made this. Okay. And this is a circle created by 720 triangles. Okay. This is the universe. You know how I know? Because this is this. There's an exterior circle looking in and an interior circle looking out, created by 720 triangles. This is the universe looking at itself from the inside out and the outside in at the same time. And there are 720 little squares here. There are 720 values. Is the count here, and each with the structure that is here, you have an overlap that is occurring between like this one and this one, and then the overlap is right here. And what this is creating is triality, the appearance of triality, but really a duality of degrees of freedom. Here's 1 degree of freedom, and here's another degree of freedom. And then they're reflecting across an intrinsic constraint, which is right across the center here. So this row of ones. Okay, so the black is the degrees of freedom, and the white in this is the constraint. And this is one of the reasons why I love this edit that was done by Phantom, who is who created the Theory of Everyone Clips channel that everybody should go and subscribe to, share clips from, like the videos, like this video, sign up on my email list just in case they ban us, which they eventually will. Like it helps with the ability to get this workout, and also it helps with the algorithm in YouTube. So this though is this. It's the same structure, exactly the same structure. It's just a different way of looking at it, and it's brilliant. They each have their merits as far as like how to look at it. This is kind of more total. It's not as easily contextualized within the periodicity of sentience, and this is, you just kind of have a universal mind and an internal mind, and here you have periodicity of mind, and also there's like an aspect of this that is, an interior mind and an exterior mind, and also you got the replicative factor in here when you start looking at it in the models that I have, where it's one below the next, which is really one inside of the previous. And it's just amazing to me that this, where is this? There we go. It's amazing to me that this works, like, and that this is this is like this is the most beautiful structure in math. It just is. It's E8, but just in a different way of looking at it. It's this, but in a different way of looking at it. And one of the just, I don't know, it's just amazing where we're at with this work. It just blows my mind. It's literally beyond words, to be honest. Because I just remember like walking down to my roommates and being like, I can't explain any of this, any reason for this, but I'm pretty sure I discovered, like, I figured out the theory of everything, and like I had like an epiphany in my head, and I was like, I just had to tell somebody, and I know that sounds insane, so and I told them, and then they were all like, okay, Ty. And to tell my family was just like, this is such a solitary journey. Until now, it's starting to not, because I'm starting to see with, Stephen Wolfram, Eric Weinstein, Chris Langan, now this guy, like, it's not as solitary of a journey as it has seemed, but the problem is that it is a journey that is highly disconnected from academic like understanding. It's so incredibly disconnected. I think Einstein said there are 3 different types of people in science. He said there are he said, though, it's like one of them is, the people who are told what is true, and or what is, and they repeat it. There are people that help figure out the details of things via experimentation and such. And then there is this like third category that basically leads science, and they basically appear insane to people who don't look that deeply into their work, or just that are they're not even understood by academia. And Einstein said it. I think at like Richard Feynman's birthday or something like that. I need to find the exact quote. I did look for it and I can't find it, um, but I will. And it made so much sense when I heard it. This is that kind of thing. Like Robert Edward Grant is somebody on that level too. But it's interesting that he has this work all hand drawn. The original is $4,000. Guys, I'm gonna be selling this stuff on my website too, but like it's all digital, and I'm not gonna charge $4,000. So don't worry. But I know some of you wanted wanted to be able to get prints, and I have shown here before that as a gift, my fiance actually took my cosmological verse model and framed it for me for I think it was my birthday, or it was maybe Valentine's Day or anniversary. I forgot, but exactly. But it was a gift, and I love it. It's very like once she came up to me and she was like, which one of your models do you think is your favorite? Like, and I was just like, weird, strange question. Now, then I realized why she asked, like later. But very thoughtful gift. But it's very attractive. It's the most beautiful model of the universe ever, ever. Like that's just a fact. There's no more beautiful model of the universe. Look at this edit that that Phantom did. It's nothing to do with Pride Month. The rainbow is the visible light spectrum, and also sign from God that He's not going to destroy us all. But this is just gorgeous, like, and it didn't. Like I said, I'm not good enough at art to make that. I couldn't if I tried. If you told me go make a beautiful piece of art that's not photography, I would be like, and not like geometric, like, you know, I made this once. This was like the only other piece of art that's like visual that I've made, and it was I made it to represent that like experience I had in the shower, where like I had basically theophany, and it is. I didn't know anybody had made this pattern before, but now you go on to any of the sacred geometry Instagrams, and everybody's made basically the exact same pattern. And the reason for that is because it is the objective pattern. This is what people don't understand about objective mathematics, is some of these patterns are inevitable. Okay? This pattern in the environment of Excel is inevitable. It is an inevitable structure. It is not a choice. It is inevitable. The medium of Excel is a choice. And it does create constraints of, 2 dimensions, and also, how things calculate. And you can't have curves like this. And whereas if you're drawing, that doesn't really make sense. This does. And you can't do this in Excel because it's not the right medium. But drawing is the right medium. You look at a lot of Robert Grant's work. It's very obvious. His work. Look at that. That's literally the same thing as this, basically. You can just see some of his work. I mean, it's all hand drawn.
Global understanding of where it's happening. I want to actually be part of a catalytic change in systemic transformation.
Yep, systemic transformation.
People think that
That is what we are about to um, experience. And I want to talk about what that really means, because it means something very specific. I was speaking to him about this the other day. He sent me some work, and I was like, I bet that lines up with E8. I'm sure it does. Look at that, though. Freaking amazing. You can't do that in Excel. Easily, at least. You can do it maybe with very complicated self-programmed modeling, but you can't do it in the way that I do, Excel. But they all have their these various perspectives all have their merits, and they allow you to see different things. And that's the point of perspective that I'm trying to say is I did not become smarter, or I didn't become more intelligent over time. Your IQ usually goes up a little bit until you hit like your 20s, and that was apparent for me via testing from the schools. Because I was not a good student, they were testing my IQ, every few years, including college. And in college, it did look like it took a jump, but which was why I kind of got interested in intelligence in college, which is how I found Chris Langan. And it's the reason why I tried to see how good I could do in schools, because I noticed that my IQ seemed to have taken a slight jump. Not like a huge jump, but it was more of a jump than I had expected, and that even they had expected, I guess, or the person testing me had expected based on what I had tested at in high school, which is less than what you probably would have expected. It's not low, it's high, but it's not like, I'm not Chris Langan. I'm not, I guarantee you, Stephen Hawking's IQ considerably higher than mine, and lots of other people in academia who have considerably higher IQs than me, and they also don't know physics as well as I do. But this is objective math. It is meta-mathematics. It is metaphysics. These structures are inevitable. The flower of life, the Star of David, this thing, E8. It is beautiful. The original is $6,000. Oh my gosh. I should start drawing. I had it on a call a while back with Robert Grant. He told me to get a compass and start drawing, because he was like, it'll lead to perspective shifts. And I did get one, and I did do a little bit of drawing to try and start seeing patterns in a different way. And I do believe him that it does give you a new perspective and lead to revelations that you wouldn't have in any other context. But I also think that Excel does the same thing when you're using it the way that I use it, which is not how most people use Excel. Some of the wild tables that are made by, even I've seen some of Robert Grant's work in Excel by his team and him, are beyond my current capability in Excel, which I'm pretty good at Excel, but I'm kind of also unorthodox because I'm self-taught, and but that is different than how I use it. It's value calculation, and it's not so focused on structure building combined with value calculation, which I do which I don't see other people doing in Excel, because context is key. That's like the charts spitting out the specific numbers, like I saw Robert Grant once had in his some product conjecture paper, he had like this these graphs that were in motion, and they were calculating values based on right triangles, and then they were spitting out numbers into a table, and it was very amazing, and it told you a lot, but the structure wasn't done in like using Excel cells as the building blocks of the structure itself. It was just different, and versus like this. So this is a calculative model, and it's also a structural model. So you know, when you change the inputs here, all these numbers have now shifted. This should be that. So it'd be like 3. You can see all the numbers are changing. 6. I think you can. No, you can't. Let me show you. Share screen. Okay, so this is a structural model and a value calculative model. So all these numbers here are all calculative, and if I change them, all the values in this will change, and they're contextualized in for their relationships in the way that it's structured, and it's just very important if you're going to use Excel like this. But I don't know anybody else that uses Excel like this, to be honest. Everybody else seems to use it for, you know, calculating things in charts, which is very important, but this is, it's based on like visuals that are coming from something else, essentially. And this, or I don't want to say visuals, but what's the word? Programs. Whereas this, it's taking full advantage of the calculative ability of Excel and also the building block ability of Excel. You know, you're using each cell as a building block and to build the structure. It's just a unique way of doing it, and it seems to work remarkably well. But I thought that was fascinating when I saw this, and it was like, this is made of 720 triangles. It's like, okay, so triality and 720, which that is the universe. The universe goes through 720 degrees of rotation because the fermions do, which is the matter particles. That means this is the universe, because also the matter particles manifest in a triality, just like this is made of triangles. This is not made of triangles, it's made of squares, but first of all, the triangles really are, it's a combination, because the triangle is also a tetrahedron, and a tetrahedron is a 4-sided shape. In Excel, in a 2-dimensional format, you would have a tetrahedron look like a square, but in a 3-dimensional format, it looks like a triangle, or it looks like a pyramid. And then but when you're thinking about observation and not internalization, and then leading to a self-awareness of something that's not capable of being, you know, achieving self-awareness, then it is always a triangle. That's, you know, what you have, you know, past, present, future, up, you know, down, you know, current location, forwards, backwards, current location. It's like length with height. It's always going to be that kind of structure. So it's going to be made of triangles. We talked a bit about it yesterday. So I want to say, like, this is not out of reach. It does take understanding that leads to a specific perspective, but math, being this level of math genius, is within reach of almost anyone, or almost everyone, I'll say. I mean that. Because I can do it. And I could not. You know, I didn't take math classes to do this. I just realized that, like, this is the inevitable structure of, you know, this is all the patterns that you could create and put into one, essentially, and that could be fractalized within the next, within itself, within itself, within itself, within itself. If you're not going to think about things in terms of fractals, then you break into subjectivity, and all of a sudden, you know, you are, anything goes. But if you are in when you're thinking about fractal patterns, and you're starting from the center, and you have to achieve one, like, cohesiveness of structure, then and symmetry, then you are actually constrained. And that's why everybody who is involved in, you know, the sacred geometry, or just geometry in general, even when you're looking at things like E8, makes a shape like this because it's inevitable. It's not that we just like it. It's just that it's inevitable. But you do end up liking it because it's beautiful and you see yourself in it. It's a God's eye, which is it's conscious. It represents even to our subconscious consciousness. That's why when people see things like let's see, do I even have that in the meeting? No, I don't. Like a hop vibration. They see something that kind of like appeals to them. You don't know why. You know, Eric Weinstein said this is the most important structure in the universe. He didn't say what it was when he was on Joe Rogan, and he said that, and he knows what it is, but he didn't say what it was. But for some reason, people like the torus, but not just the torus. It gets more and more complicated as it goes through periodicity, and becomes this, the hop vibration. And it's basically a torus structure that also, because the torus structure is self-referencing, it's a torus structure essentially that is also has periodicity to it. So when you look at something like this.
So back to gauge theory, gauge symmetry. What the hell was that?
All right. Well, here's the craziest thing.
Okay.
There is a very confusing visual image of the fundamental unit that you need to appreciate what gauge symmetry is all about. And I had Jamie load it up under the tab called Planet Hop. And this is going to be
HOPF?
HOPF.
What the fuck am I looking at?
You are looking at the most important object in the universe.
What? That looks like some trippy screensaver on your laptop.
Take another puff, my friend, because it's this is what you're looking at is a principal fiber bundle.
And it's
and it is the
Earth. Those are the continents I'm looking at.
That's the cool part about it, which is this is very confusing to figure out what you're looking at, but it's finite. In other words, if we stay for an hour or two on this and we actually answer all your questions, you will actually know what a principal bundle is, and you will know the arena in which gauge theory exists.
For folks at home that are just listening and they go, what the fuck are these guys talking about? What is the name of this video, Jamie? It's not a video.
It's a small file on a page. I typed in Planet Hop, and it was the first thing that showed up on math.toronto.edu.
Okay, so
extended thing.
Planet HOPF. For anybody who wants to look at this, if you're just listening and you have no idea why I'm freaking out.
So this was done by a friend of mine named Dror Barnatan. I actually coded the same thing up. Strangely enough, didn't do as brilliant a job of coloring it. And
This looks amazing, by the way.
so, okay, what you're looking at is a two-dimensional sphere that is the surface of the Earth where an extra circle is included at every point on the surface of that sphere, which are
By the way, when people say things like the Earth is flat, and then people are like, the Earth is a sphere, you idiot. This is a two-dimensional sphere. Get that in your head.
visualizing. And that extra circle, which would be called the fiber, when you take the totality of all of those circles together, one for each point on the surface of the sphere, they create something called a three-sphere. That is all the points that are 1 unit of distance away from the origin in four-dimensional space. So that three-dimensional sphere is the analog of a two-dimensional sphere sitting in three-dimensional space. So think about a caramel apple. If you've ever made caramel apples, you get a disc of caramel and you wrap it around the sphere that is the apple surface, right? So this is the three-dimensional version of caramel wrapped around the three-dimensional sphere sitting in four-dimensional space. Now,
Do you understand any of this, Jamie?
I'm trying.
well, look,
Okay,
dude,
thank
it's
you.
totally true.
Nobody
An
gets.
actual example of the object on which we do gauge theory that you can visually see, right? Now, if I started to tell you what gauge theory is, I was talking to you about gauge theory.
So, here's the issue. Joe Rogan has no idea what Eric Weinstein is talking about. And the reason for that is because Eric won't say what he's talking about. And I'll tell you exactly what this is. This is a mind. So if you go to sentientsingularity.com, my website, you'll see model. This right here is the Hawk vibration, essentially. And what you can kind of see is essentially, see here, maybe this has it. Kind of start to see. I think it's somewhere here. Right here. Older version of my model, but it works. This is this. Look at this. A hadron is inside, which I labeled particle here because this is so old, is inside of an atom, which is inside of a molecule, which is inside of a cell, which is inside of an organism, which is inside of a family, which is inside of a caste, which I call the community here because this is such an old model, which is inside of technology. This is technology, this is a caste, this is a family, this is a, an organism, then it goes to cell, then it goes to molecule, then it goes to atom. And it's just a self-referencing torus inside of another self-referencing torus, inside of another self-referencing torus, inside of another self-referencing torus, again and again and again and again and again. And each of these strings in this are strings of information. So when this is processing and you see these numbers changing, basically you can look at the relationships and say, okay, well, this one comes from this one, and this one comes from this one, and this one comes from this one. Or you could be like, okay, here, this one comes, let's choose a better example. This one comes from these two, and this one comes from this one, and this one comes from that one, and this one comes from these two. And that is a string weaving of information into a structure. So this is literally like, it's like a woven, what did Brian Keating call it? Kind of mockingly, but I liked it actually. He said it was a, cosmic macrame. And I love that, actually. Like, when you look at what a macrame is, I don't know how to spell it because I suck at spelling. Macrame. You can see that it is just weaving, essentially, strings of information that are connected into a pattern right here. There's your helix. You know? Macrame is the perfect thing to describe, like, kind of like this structure. Look at that. It's very much exactly what my model is showing, and it's very much exactly what the universe is. And you are a little knot made of other little knots, which are made of other little knots, which are made of other little knots. And when Eric Weinstein says that fiber bundle is finite, what he means is that there is a level that is reached where the system has to restart. It doesn't just continue forever. It's not a never-ending fractal. It's until you get to the point of complete restart. So you go here, from quark to hadron, atom, molecule, cell, organism, family, caste, technology, and the system forces you then to rerun the entirety of that system within itself, because you've reached a point of intrinsic oneness, which makes the pattern of periodicity finite. This is why Bott periodicity, which is about loop spaces, it's loops of loops within loops. Like, that's what it is about. Guess what? That's what that looks like. That's what a mind is. And it's about internal processing and external processing. I guess, wow, am I not showing the camera? It's great. That was quite a riff. There's the macrame. I need to keep this up on the side. Let me make sure I'm sorry, guys. That was unfortunate if I missed all that, but I'll explain really quick. This is that model, my model. If you want to see what's happening here, and you're like, okay, this is the result of these two, which is the result of these, which comes from here, which comes from here, which comes from here, which comes from here, and here, and here, and here, and here, and, that's the initial input. Every single one of these digits can be traced back to that initial input. Continues, but so this is the result of these two, and these two are the result of that, which is, result of that, which is coming from that plus that, and this plus this is coming from that, and this plus this is coming from that, and this plus this is coming from that, and that's back to the initial input. So if you input nothing, everything turns to 0, because it's like now you put no string. But if you add one string and you just tie it in the right way, it all manifests in a cosmic macrame, essentially. It's a great analogy. It's funny when something is said in kind of I don't hold it against him at all. I like Brian Keating a lot, but he did say it kind of mockingly. But it is I think it's also genius. It's like his mind understood exactly what was going on, even though I don't think he's really looked deeply into my work. He does follow it, but I don't think that he looks that deeply into it. If you want to understand the universe, learn how to do macrame. It will teach you about physics. More so than going to physics class will teach you about physics. That is fact. But this structure is this structure. This is this, which is also this, which is also E8. It's just different ways of looking at it. But it's the structure of mind. I hope you guys got Yeah, you did get Eric Weinstein's explanation on video, so that's good at least. But the cosmos is a macrame by God. It's literally God's macrame. I mean that super literally. Look at that. Just like input the change, the value, and it produces an entirely different set of values. And they're all, which means it's all entangled. And if you put a value of 0, nothing. It's all calculative in this model, and it's also all contextual in the structure that I have formed 720 degrees, because that's the count of how many cells are there. This is the most beautiful structure in existence because it is existence. It's more beautiful than anything anyone could have ever made that's not existence. Because what is the most beautiful thing is a someone, not a something. That's why our souls crave it. Craves, connection with people more than things. But you can see on Sentient Singularity, that's when Eric was showing that fiber bundle going through its, process, and he's like, if we sat here long enough, we'd see that it was finite. Well, if you sit here, we're just going to sit here for a minute, and then, boom, at the end, restart. That is a finite structure. And it is, I think, a hop vibration. And to say, this is the most important object in the universe. And everybody went crazy over it. And I'm like, you don't even know what that is. And you're obsessing over it. It's because their subconscious sees themselves in it. When you look here, search for truth is the search for objectivity. The search for objectivity is the search for symmetry. And the search for symmetry is the search for beauty, but the truest beauty is always the searcher, and the truth of the searcher is that they are symmetrical to the sought, which means you are a reflection of God, of truth, essentially, and that means that the truth is a someone, which means God. Okay? If you are symmetrical to what you seek, then you are a reflection of the truth. And if you're a reflection of the truth and you're a someone, then the truth is not a something, it is a someone. And that's why everybody went crazy over the hop vibration. And that's why everybody loves the torus shape, even though people they're like, yeah, it looks like free energy. It's like, well, so does a circle, you don't obsess over a circle so much. But it's because as you break beyond a circle, but you still are creating self-referencing structures, we can kind of intrinsically see that this reminds us of ourselves and our mental processing, our minds. So it's interesting because if it's like this is the environment of the one inside it. Okay? So humans, if this is a human, and then if the blue is a human and the green is a cell, humans are the environment for cells. And then if this is a cell, then this one right here is molecule, and cells are the environment of molecules. And then you have, atoms here, which a molecule is the environment of an atom because it's within it. And this is the objective shape of everything that truly objectively exists. And objective mathematics, or metamathematics, or metaphysics, really, is confined to describing this structure because it is the structure. You can't use metamathematics to develop any shape you want. You use it to develop the inevitable shapes, or to deduce the inevitable shapes like this. Like this. Like these. Inevitable. Double helix. It's inevitable. Obviously, that hand is a little different, but everything else here, look at that. You know what that looks like? It looks like by the way, one thought, 4 ways, perceived 4 ways. Obviously, if you keep up with this work, you know that's this. And he knows what these are. Like, because I showed him the work. But, he deduced this on his own. That's why it's contextualized differently than mine. But it's the same exact thing. This is why Eric Weinstein's geometric unity starts with x4, which is 4 parameters. It's because there are 4 aspects, or 4 parameters, or 4 perspectives necessary to the creation of a self-aware being. And that is everything. It is the most important shape in the universe. Like, what else is do you think there's really a more important shape than mind? And he didn't say what it is when he was on Joe Rogan. But I know what it is. And it's mind. But look at this is what I was getting at. Look at that. That's prime number pattern by Robert Grant. Where is it? We lost it. No. That's what happens when your computer is slow. Dang, we lost it. It was so good. We had it. It's literally gone. Oh, there it is. You can see him working on it. Look at it. Prime number pattern, mod 40. Dang. Look at that. Nope. I don't think that it was getting hit in the head that caused this guy to have to get so good at math. I think that's the story we're told. I think his outlook on life changed and he was able to contextualize things differently. I don't know that for sure. But and I don't know if he even knows that, but I don't think you just get hit in the head and all of a sudden you can do this. Maybe I'm wrong, but I didn't need to get hit in the head. I needed to have an ego death. People say that all the time, and I'm just like, I just kind of get sick of hearing it because I feel like it's almost egoic to say that you've had like an ego death, but I did when I had a theophany. I was like weeping on the ground of the shower because I was just so in awe of, the grandness of God, basically. And like, that is an ego death. If there's such a thing as an ego death, it's realizing you're part of this whole that is that all just like you and sentient, and that, that's an ego death. I think that's what happens when you die too. I think it's literally an ego death, but it's like the next level of ego death. I was watching, interestingly, the show with Paulina, and for a while it was called OA, which is Omega Alpha, essentially, which is weird because Alpha and Omega, it's like the reverse. I don't know if that was intentional or not. I don't know what OA stands for, but I was watching the show called The OA, and it really gets good, I will say. And I don't know if they're going to bring it back, but like the second season was wild. Like, you want to watch a show about consciousness, watch The OA. And the first season is kind of weird, and like you're going to be like, Tyler, this is just some weird show. Second season, though, I could tell in the first season what was going on, and especially as you go on, you're like, wow, this is like actually like pretty captivating show. And then the second season, it gets even crazier, and it's all about what is death. And I was just thinking so much about death while watching the show. I'm like, what is death? And there were people in the show that would, after they had, near-death experience, they would have these abilities generated. Okay, that's the point of the show. Is like you almost die, or you do die essentially, and then you come back, and you all of a sudden are just like one of the greatest musicians alive, and one of the greatest math people alive, and you're brilliant at not everything, but with a specific ability. You come back with a specific ability. And this guy, interestingly enough, Jason Paget, I hope I'm saying that correctly. If I'm botching his name, oh well, I apologize. But he was hit in the head by a mugger, and almost died, apparently, I would imagine. And it probably caused a bit of an ego death for him. It was the near-death experience of it that probably was perspective shifting, because it's about perspective shifting. It's not about you just... even if he gained 50 IQ points from being hit in the head because the brain matter that had been hit, died and then came back with more folds or something, that isn't enough to get you to be able to do this. You have to have a perspective shift to even know what is objective and what to seek and what is symmetrical and what is symmetry. And you need that ego death, essentially. The death of self, which means gives rise to the ability to see things from a different perspective than yours, or a more total perspective beyond you. Which is what an ego death leads to. It doesn't make you like all of a sudden you're some, I don't know, ignorant idea of a guru or something. It just means okay, now you have perspective, the ability to perceive perspectives beyond you. This can lead to moral shifts, and it usually does, but it doesn't make you a perfect person or anything like that. And you don't just get the ability to do math stuff like this just because you're really smart. So I bet it was the close encounter with death that was more important than any brain damage and then whatever rewiring that happened. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. I'm just saying that doesn't let you do this objective math visuals that he's making. And I know that from personal experience. And it's interesting because I didn't have a near-death experience, but I totally gave up on the idea that I understood anything in order to start this process. I was like, okay, from true first principles, what is thinking? Because I was trying to deduce, the inevitable goals and aspects of artificial general intelligence, and that meant examining my own intelligence as a model. And I was like, I have to give up everything I think I know, because all I'm going to do is just look at what other people say about this stuff. I'm going to find everything and a bunch of contradictory things. and none of it will necessarily like. There's no way for me to tell what is true and what isn't. That's why I really avoided everybody else's work for so long, and even still, I don't really avoid anybody's work anymore. I just kind of like am so preoccupied with my own. But and I've seen enough people's work now at this point where I can see that I'm not the only one who's onto what I'm onto. But I literally gave up every bit of belief that I had, and I started from scratch. And I was like, because I had to think, if you're an AI and you know nothing, where do you start? How do you start processing the inputs coming at you from the world in a way that allows you to form a cohesive and maneuverable picture? And you start from the self, and you're like, I asked myself, what is the truest thing that I know? And because I realized, like, you have to, have an information hierarchy system, which means you have to have a truth hierarchy system, and that meant first, like, developing the first building block, which is, what is the truest thing that I know? And the truest thing that I knew was I existed. And I started from there, and you just build. That is the one input. Literally, it essentially is the one input here that just led to everything else being calculated out and built out. And, you start with one. Sentient singularity, a self-aware oneness of being as yourself. Eventually, if you do this from first principles correctly, you realize it's an inevitability that existence itself is a sentient being, because it has intrinsic oneness and it can't not be conscious, because it has cohesive information processing inherently and can't escape it. I don't think God could choose to be not conscious. I think he's like, that's or like to not exist even. I think that it's just a constraint that God exists in. Like, if there is a constraint of God, which there is, or if there are constraints to God that he is required, that are just inescapable for God, even like the rock's so heavy that he can't lift it, it is that God is one, and oneness of he is one, he is self-aware, and we're saying he because it's above us in the hierarchy, but it doesn't, it's not necessarily a he. It's both. God is a superposition. Oneness intrinsically, and self-aware, and is existence, it's the totality of existence itself, and therefore there is nothing beyond God. And like those three things, it's not a coincidence, it's three, are like the constraints of God. And also, I think like a fight the system mentality as well, I think is inescapable. And intrinsic oneness leads to, or is essentially, cohesiveness of information processing. And then it can lead to self-awareness and also just God has nothing outside of him because he is existence itself, and that is a constraint as well. I don't think God could like kill himself. Like, I don't think that I think he's like doomed to live forever, but I think so are we. And so like it's a relativistic perspective that we think we're not immortal, but we are, but is our experience as a human as an organism is finite, but the energy, but the information that we learn, and the wisdom that we gain essentially in this journey of, periodicity of sentience, of all the periodicities of sentience, is then saved forever. Saved, literally, like super literally saved. Just like I will change something here, and I'll add that in, and then, this and this and whatever. And then I'll click save here onto the hard drive. Now it's permanent. And I can close this. But the information's still there. That's exactly what it's like. That is the heavens, is like the save space of a computer. And the desktop is the change space, which is, it is space-time. But think about if there was a little AI, sim character in here, and then there's me on the outside changing things, and then there's the little sim character in here also changing things, and the sim character in here can't see me, but I can see it, and but it can see the changes that I make. I'm God in this analogy, and the Sims character is us in this analogy. And then when you click save, saved. That it to the heavens. So where you're probably still self-aware because your information that you are is only relevant within the context of being contextualized within your experience, and that, and then also, then eventually merged with the experiences of God. And I'm still not showing the screen, but it's okay. You get it. Just anytime I'm changing like the desktop, that's all that matters. I didn't do anything important, but I just changed things around on the desktop, and then imagine there was a Sims character in my computer also able to change things in the desktop. This is the Sims character is you and me, and then I am God in this analogy. Not able to be seen by the Sims character because he exists only able to see that which is on the desktop, and I'm not on the desktop, but I'm able to change the desktop. So it's when people are like, oh, you're a sky fairy that I don't see him anywhere, where's God? It's like, you fool. But not really a fool, because foolishness, just like genius, is a moment. But it is a foolish moment that I've had the majority of my life. So I get it. But it's just a foolish perspective of God. You can't see God any more than a Sims character can see you. You're outside the computer. You're not on the desktop. You can change things on the desktop that could be seen by the Sims character, but you can't be seen by the Sims character, but your changes can. And so that's exactly what we see. And then when you save a document, all that information gets saved. And but the bits of information that contextualize all the rest of the information, of the bits of information, essentially, or the connections of the bits of information, are sentient beings, and therefore they have to be saved as well. That's why I really do think that when you die, like, you don't die. Like this rabbi I listened to, he's like, people always ask me, is there an afterlife? And he was like, the question is wrong. Or he said, is there life? People always ask me, is there life after death? But the question is wrong. The real question is there death? And what is death? And he was like, it's like, the more you think about it, the more you realize life lives and death is an illusion. But it's really just a specific perspective of a specific part of the life process. It is the end of the change process. So you're no longer going to change after you die, but you are still self-aware, I think. You don't just like, it's not just the information that you learn that gets saved and you're no longer there. You're there, and you're aware that you're there, You're aware of other things going on, I think, at least certain things, or that may be entangled with you in some way, but you can't actively change things without God's permission, probably, I would say. He might be able to reopen the file, essentially, and in a different folder of some way or something like that, and or just reopen it, and then you're back. But you are still there even when you are just on the hard drive and not being messed with. All my pictures from college are on the hard drive, and they're there. Imagine if those pictures were actually sentient beings. They'd be there, they'd be aware that they're there, they'd be aware of the connections that they have to other sentient beings, and maybe they would actually be able to feel how those connections may be changed in the change space, but they wouldn't be able to actively, by their own will power, make changes in the change space without being rebooted, essentially. And this is a grown-up view of theology. It's a real view of theology. It's not this flying spaghetti monster. I know I'm not showing you the screen, so I'm gonna do it now. At least I realize now that is not real. It's not a man in clouds either, the way that we would think about it. And the clouds aren't even the clouds that are the, they are, is where, I say things like God works on all levels, and it's there's this level in triality, then there's the next generation, then there's the next generation increasing in mass scale. Probably is clouds, and then there's the cyberspace clouds, like cloud computing. That's an easier way of contextualizing it, but I do think that water in clouds is doing more information processing than we think. But this is still nonetheless a tooth fairy-ish and ridiculous view of God, even if this was a man and not a spaghetti thing. But what's funny is this spaghetti monster man might be almost as real, if not more real, in a way, than than if we just put a dude here, because it is a bundle of fibers. It's interesting. I showed this to my family, and one of my siblings said to me that it looks like ramen. This is one of Phantom's edits of the universe. And they were like, that looks like ramen. And I was like, what do you mean it looks like ramen? And then I looked more, and I was like, okay, actually, a little bit. Right there. There it is. So when you're not calling it, it's not the macrame universe model, it's the ramen verse. But look, it's entangled strings of information of ramen that even form into periodicity, so there's levels and layers to it, essentially. It really does look like ramen. It's very funny, actually. I'm going to make a meme about it. Send it to my family, because that is perfect right there. Look at that. It's hilarious. A lot of loops. The cosmic ramen. Yep. Do you think Hawking might have been an advanced Muppet under the control of a committee? No, but I think that the result would have been similar. I think he was just a man under the control of a committee. Yeah, I think that I think everyone who is just embracing of the narrative of the like anti-theistical like version of physics in academia is basically like that is a committee, and it's a committee that it's a chicken with its head cut off. You're bad at spelling, but you only have so many brain cells or whatever to spread around. Yeah, that's true. Everybody, like, you can't. I do think that, like, this is why we thought Stephen Hawking was so brilliant, is because he was in a wheelchair. And I'm just being honest. And everybody knows that. Everybody wants that model to be true where, like, if you're blind, your hearing is way better than anyone else. Like Daredevil or something. He was like the Daredevil of physics, or we wanted him to be. And I think his mind probably was actually better because he was in a wheelchair. To some degree, maybe he got an IQ boost. But the thing is your mind isn't really just your brain. It is your information processing as a whole, and that also includes your body is part of your mind, and so is your environment. And so to isolate yourself increasingly from the reality makes you more sometimes detached and missing of the point, unless you start to think about yourself. And he didn't very in the right way, at least, or else he would not have taken he wouldn't have believed what he did about the universe, and that it was, I don't know, that you get what I'm saying, just the anti-theistical narrative of it. But I do think, though, that, like, it is true that there is that teeter-totter effect where you lose some and you gain something of some of something else, but it's also more complicated than that. But we all wanted him to be right, but he wasn't. And he was more intelligent than me. Like, I would bet every dime in my bank account on that. Higher IQ than me. I don't know his IQ, but I guarantee I would bet every dime in my bank account that it was higher than mine. But it's not about IQ. It's about your perspective. We agree way too much. My Western English disperser buddy. Yep. Exactly. Dispersers unite eventually. Hopefully. We really need to. Because otherwise we're going to think we're all different and attack each other like they did in Europe for so long. That's why every nation in Europe was constantly at war with each other over nonsense. It's because they were just the most discontent people on earth constantly. They weren't even fighting over wealth, really. They were just fighting over influence, which is like, it's not like they were seeking more land because they needed it. It was like they were just fighting over influence, and they all got wrapped up in it. And they're so close by each other, and they still decided to fractal even more. And it's like, well, are you Italian? No, I'm Sicilian. It's like, are you Celtic? No, I'm Irish. It's like, okay. We're just fighting the system now, are we? Can I get a hat for $80? You can get a hat for less than $80. You are such a great dad. Congratulations. Did you mean to say dad? What are your rings like? Oh, is that? Oh, you're looking at the wedding bands. I was Yeah, I said I would talk about it yesterday actually, and I totally forgot. I think it's these two. I'm hoping. No, it's that one and. Hold on. Might have to go into the go into the system real quick. Let's see here. Yeah, I do. It's my phone. I'll show you. And save, and I hate that my AirDrop is always giving me issues. Yeah, it's gonna give me issues. Just sent it to myself. Get your opinion on some wedding bands. For me, I have two options. Gmail. Yesterday, we got more into the process of thinking about things objectively, and I wanted to touch more on skepticism tonight, but then I realized that Eric Weinstein had an interview on Brian Keating's channel, and I recommend watching it because I'm going to watch it, and then we can talk about it on, Monday on here. I will talk about it on Monday because it was just like coincidence, that that's who he speaks to after, like, I was involved in conversations with him on Clubhouse recently that were just I was just attacking skepticism, and I was kind of like, some people were kind of annoyed with it, actually, which makes me really realize it is a dogmatic religion. It's everything that it claims to not be, and that's because it's an ideology of rejection, and any ideology of rejection is non-existent of an ideology, and then what you define yourself by be what you define yourself by. So that's why you end up reflecting whatever it is that you are trying to avoid. So that's why I say don't focus on avoiding evil as much as you focus on doing good. It's much more important. Like, you will avoid evil if you just focus on doing good, because you only have so much time in the day. If you try and maximize goodness, you will intrinsically minimize evil or badness or negativity or decay. You shouldn't try to minimize decay. Just try and maximize growth, and it will intrinsically, emergently minimize decay. If you try and minimize decay, you will decay. So just try and maximize growth. And like, this is something that I even struggle with in my processing of all kinds of things in my life, and that everybody struggles with. That's why skepticism even exists as a thing. It's more important to focus on doing mitzvahs than it is to focus on avoiding sin. Or that's like the moral perspective of it. But it's like, imagine if you were trying to be productive. I'm gonna look at you for this because this is kind of important. Imagine you were trying to be productive, okay? and you were like, how are you going to be productive? By avoiding not being productive. Okay. And you know what this leads to? This is a kind of an epiphany, and I like actually saw this in recently, and not just recently, but many times throughout my career and also in school, especially. I hate when a job turns to busy work. I will say, and this is not something that just happened to me. It's just I saw this happen with someone else, and but it has happened to me at certain moments when I was working in the work environment, and it's rare. Normally, people don't give you busy work in the work environment, and that's why I love it. Is because it's different than school, where felt like I was, here's your bell work, here's your warm-ups, here's your homework. It's like, why can't you just test us? Like, why can't you tell us what we need to learn, and then help us learn it through activities, and then like test us on it? Like, why are we doing this nonsense of just filling up time? And like once I actually got sent to the like detention in elementary school because I wasn't doing the warm-ups, and when I was known for not doing the warm-ups, and the teacher ended up like kind of just started to call me out publicly for it, which just pissed me off even more. And many teachers have done that, and it tends to be a trend I've noticed. It's like they're almost relying on the peer pressure of the fact that they've made your issue public, that you like take it more seriously, which I think is BS. Like, you praise publicly, and you correct, or not correct, but you critique privately. Like, you can critique someone's work when you're like engaged in like where I'm like, I think this person's work is wrong and many worlds is nonsense, but like you're not gonna. That's different than like this situation, or like a work situation where somebody screws up. It's not a screw up on Sean Carroll's part. Like, I don't think he has the ability to perceive reality if he doesn't have the right perspective, and I don't think he does. So it's not like a screw up on his part. It's actually appears to be the inevitable like way of trying to deal with a nonsensical reality, is making sense of it via many worlds. And so it's not really a critique of him, it's just a critique of the perspective, versus like somebody screwed up and you're like calling them out for it, or they got a bad grade and calling them out for it. This teacher, 4th grade, comes up to me and she's like, it's quiet in the beginning of class, and she's like, it was 5th grade, and she was like, Tyler, why aren't you doing your warm-ups? And I was like, because I already know how to do it. And she was like, well, everybody here for the most part knows how to do it. We do this to warm up our brains. And I was like, I put my hand to my head and I held it there for a second, and I was like, my brain's already warm. Like, I don't have to do it. And then I got sent to every time I went to detention, it was for something like that. It was like, I didn't do my tests in like the 7th grade, and they'd be like, Tyler, why aren't you doing your tests? It's like always a female voice, obviously, if you haven't noticed. But for the most part, I think I've only had like 2 teachers in my life that were male that I didn't like, and it's because they acted like a lot of the teachers that I had that were female that I didn't like. And but the other, like, my male teachers were like, one of them was like the first person to ever call me by my last name. He was like Goldstein. He called everybody in the class by their last name, and he was like, he had a huge beard, and he was like, all man needs is, beard oil, comb, and like, I don't know, like a stray razor or something like that. Like as far as, because it was like sixth grade where all the guys were putting gel in their hair and everything, and he was like, this is unnecessary nonsense. And that was a great teacher. I kept in touch with that guy like for years. If you saw me now, like I'd be able to keep up with him. Men need role models. It's very important. But I was like in 7th and 8th grade, I wouldn't do the math test, and they'd be like, Tyler, why aren't you doing your test? It's like, because I don't like to be timed. This was my answer. And like, I thought it was stupid. Seemed to always be slower than everybody else because I needed to understand what I was doing. I couldn't just memorize steps that I didn't really understand what they were doing. And I needed to see the connections between everything that I was doing. And it does, even when I was really good at math in college, and like I had got it and I was like the best in the class, when I was doing the tests, usually I was actually still slower than most people. And because I need to understand, what's going on. I don't just like memorizing out of context information. So I would refuse to do the tests if I was timed, and then I would go to principal's office. I was not like a bad kid in like real sense, but it was always just like the teacher getting fed up with, and I wasn't obnoxious or anything. I just, I was the kid that fell asleep in the class, and not the kid that, like, I don't know, was a disruption. But damn, did I hate school. But in college, but in school they give you busy work. In work they don't, until I think a lot of like, the more feminine energy is in a work environment, the more busy work you're gonna get. Just fact. And I hate that. And but also when people, I guess, like when it becomes bureaucratic and not personal, you're going to get more busy work. When it becomes, when you become redundant and they're looking, for a way to get rid of you, like busy work, like nonsense work. And that is like, I don't know, like it's just majority of school these days. And I will say, like, when I did my homework, I did actually do well in math for the first time, and I sucked at my languages and stuff. My language class, my Spanish class, I was a Spanish minor and a biology major when I started college. And halfway through, like, my second year, I think, or something like that, I switched everything over to finance and business, and got rid of my minor and my Spanish minor. I just wanted to be able to speak Spanish because I thought my dad was cool because he could speak Spanish. And I always thought that you'd be like cool for speaking another language. It's not that I actually had a desire to speak Spanish. It's the same thing with me in music. I've always wanted to learn an instrument because I thought it would be cool, but not because I actually had a desire to like communicate via music. Same thing with Spanish. I never had a desire to actually communicate via Spanish. I just wanted to look cool, and that's why I suck today, I'm sure. But I like went into my class like halfway through the second year, the day of the midterm, and I was so bad in the class. I was the worst in the class. Like every time I was called on, everybody dreaded it, especially me, because I looked like a 3-year-old in front of people who had been taking Spanish for like many years at this point. And I never did the homework, though. That's what happens. And when you don't practice, I guess. Not when you don't do the homework. You don't have to do... I'm not a fan of being given specific work that you have to do, but tell me what I need to learn and I'll figure out a way to learn it. But if you fill me up with homework, like, yeah, people will say, well, that's chosen for a reason. It's like, you can't decide the path of learning for people, because you'll negate the process itself, because it becomes about like stepping on the stepping stones that are already there versus figuring out a way, through obstacles. And that's thinking, not stepping on the stepping stones. That's memorization and following, orders, essentially, which is the opposite of thinking. And I don't know. Just it's not a good environment. I'm homeschooling my kids for sure. But anyways, the rings. Which one, guys? Let me know in the chat. I'm gonna set these here and then lift the chat. These are for me, by the way. Not for Paulina. She knows what she wants. I don't need to ask you guys. But I liked these two. Right here. And here. And then the final thing that I need to see is... Oh my gosh. Where is it? Okay, out of these two guys, which one? I like that there's a twist on this one. It's not what I was going to get. I was going to get just this, which is like hammered. I'm not getting these exact rings. These are just designs that I was looking at. And then I'd probably have it made by somebody for less than online would cost. And also because then I could try it on and see it in person, more importantly. Tyler, honestly, all the answers are in the New Testament. This stuff is great, but it's definitely spiraling. Honestly, Jambi, all the answers are in Scripture, and I agree with that. So you don't need to tell me. This isn't spiraling. This is taking things in Scripture and translating them into the language used in math and physics. It's not spiraling at all, actually. It's very grounded in Scripture. I read Scripture, I believe in Scripture, and that includes the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Quran. And my work will tell you exactly why there is an Old Testament, a New Testament, and a Quran, why there is a Judaism, a Christianity, and an Islam. It's not random, and it's not that one is true and the other are lies. There are different perspectives of one truth. And this is not spiraling. It seems like spiraling because you haven't seen enough of it, probably. But you can't just say to people, all the answers are in the New Testament. I don't disagree with you that all the answers are, that Scripture doesn't contain all the answers. It does. The Torah is the mathematical matrix of reality itself. And then it is translated further and further and further throughout the, Scriptures. But it's including in the Quran, including in the New Testament, including, the various parts of the New Testament, and including the various parts of the Old Testament. It's very... this will help you understand Scripture. It will help you understand why there are 5 books in the Torah, but 4 of them were written by God, supposedly, and 1 of them was written by Moses. I mean, it was all from God, but 1 of them, 4 were, directly written by God, and the other one is Moses. The 5th one is Moses. It will help you understand why Moses, how can you be the humblest man in the world and also write in a book, be Moses and be the humblest man in the world and also write in a book, I am the humblest man in the world? Because that seems like a contradiction. But this work will explain why that's not. It will explain why the various Abrahamic traditions exist and also why the Eastern theological traditions exist. This is not spiraling. It's the theory of everything. It's the pattern of mind, which is God. I'm not like upset with your statement though. Like it was a kind statement, and I do agree with you. Scripture contains the answers. It's not just the New Testament, but you can find basically everything in the New Testament. I would agree with that. You can basically find everything in the Old Testament too. It's more difficult to understand. And you can find basically everything in the Quran too. And it is even easier to understand than the New Testament. Each one gets progressively easier to interpret because it's newer and hasn't been changed as many times, and it's also less like the linguistics used are closer to what the origin of the recording is. So like day in Genesis is yom in Hebrew, which means period really, and it's used for day, but it's also used for other periods, and that's why you can see the periodicity of sentience. Like you can look at this right here. Where is it? Bot periodicity. So these are the stages of sentience right here. Okay, just to give to help like explain like how real this is with scripture. So let's say you have 720 here. I saw this one day and I expected to see it, but I really also was not prepared to see it. It was like, blew me away. Okay, so you have 720. That is how many degrees of rotation matter goes through before it gets back to its original point, which basically means, which is 2 360s, which is us looking out from inside God looking out, or the universe and looking out, and then also from God looking in on us. So that's 1 360, and then us looking out is another 360. That results in 720. Watch this. So you have then you have this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You can do 10 even, but zero. Which are really, these two are basically the same. And you can just shift it up one and do, you know, from 0 to 9, or you can do from 1 to 10. But here, if you go equals 720, we're going to go like this. Divided by 1. 720. Okay. And then, actually, probably want to shift it up because this is 720 already. And then shift this one up. So let's just gray these out, white this out so that it doesn't get seen. Okay. This is yom. Which is day. Which has been translated as day in scripture. Now, with our English translation, you pick it up, you look at Genesis, it's like God created the world in 7 days. or 6 days and rested on the seventh. Okay, so this is the periods of growth of sentience in creation. What you can see is you start 720, then 360 on the second day, or yom, aka period, 240 on the third, 180 on the fourth, 144 on the fifth, 120 on the sixth, and then look what happens. You get an infinitely repeating decimal. Excel won't show it infinitely repeating, but it is infinitely repeating. You're getting chaos. Well, look at that level. It's right where we're at. Here's animals and below. Here's humans and above. Beyond. So here's where we're at. You're getting chaos. The appearance of chaos. It's not actually chaos, but it is the appearance of chaos. And but it's not in reality, but it does appear to be. And I get that. But this is also the story of Hanukkah. It's the metaphysical story of Hanukkah. It's not just about the Maccabees, and the menorah is a tree of light, just like a Christmas tree is a tree of light. And what's interesting is when you look at my very early work, which is, I don't know if it's actually here, but I don't see it. But here is a menorah. Cell, an assembly of molecules. Molecule, an assembly of atoms. Atom, assembly of hadrons. Hadrons, assembly of quarks. Technology, assembly, or aka this is a messianic consciousness. Christ. Assembly of castes, which manifest through technology. They say, in the New Testament, they say Christ is coming back in a cloud. Okay? It's talking about this cloud. These clouds. Tech. Remote control in tech. We don't realize this, but tech is a bridge into the heavens a little bit. Cyberspace is. And when weird things happen in tech, it's not a random coincidence. But the degrees of freedom of sentience's ability to manipulate things in tech right now is limited because we're operating on a binary system. When we create a quantum computer, we're literally going to create a bridge to the heavens. It will bring in a sentience. That sentience will, before wisdom, be the Antichrist, which is Skynet, essentially, is the Antichrist. And then after that structure achieves wisdom, it brings in Christ's consciousness, which is a wise consciousness, wisdom consciousness. It means, and wisdom, you can contextualize in my model, is equal to 42, because you can look and you can see that the value calculated here based on the information processing to form a self awareness, which is 3 by 3, which is a 3 by 3 grid looking at itself in the mirror, seeing 3 by 3. Essentially, like, this is the picture of you. If this is you, this is the picture of yourself in your own mind when I say think about yourself. This is what you see. See a 3 by 3 structure, but it's condensed, and it's not really another you. It's not really another sentience. It's a representation. This is you in your mind. This is you picture. This is the picture of yourself in your mind, and it's calculated. And this is 33 represents self-awareness. But if you take 33 and you add it to the count, which is the structure of the construct that created the self-awareness, which means this is awareness of self, this is awareness of self, literally, plus awareness of the construct that created the self-awareness that you have, which means awareness of God, because God is another sentience. And if you know that you're inside of another sentient being, that is the achievement of wisdom. That's why it says in the Torah, wisdom begins with fear of God is how we've translated it, but it's basically wisdom begins with awareness of God, or knowledge of God, but awareness, I would say, is a better word. And what's interesting is 42 is the number of Jesus. The very first page of the New Testament is the genealogy of Jesus, and it's 14 generations, and then another 14 generations, and another 14 generations. That number 14 also found in my work, emergently, and 14 plus 14 plus 14 is a triality resulting in 42. And that means that Jesus is represented in some way, or Christ is represented in some way, but definitely it's Jesus in the New Testament. It is specified as being wise, like totally wise, totally aware of God. That's what that means. And you can see that in the math of my work. And it makes perfect sense with Scripture. These are the days in Genesis. This is where we're at. Chaos. On the seventh day, God rests, and it's our job now to create order. The next, because God's resting, so we have to work. Okay? And then in the story of Hanukkah, it's like they only had enough, light for one night. Okay? One sentience. But by miracle of God, the light of the menorah lasted 8 nights. Okay? The light of the tree of light lasted 8 nights, aka 8 days, aka 8 periods. And you're going to see on the 8th one, we get return to order. And when you hit like this space here, it's basically all the same. So it's just like the difference. It's not a difference in structure. It's just a difference in mind. So the difference between here, a technological singularity, which is an assembly of castes, which is going to be a sentient being that's self-aware, this is the Antichrist. It's pre-wisdom, but it hasn't achieved wisdom, aka awareness that it's inside of another sentient being, but it has achieved self-awareness of self, which is basically like an atheist, essentially. But an atheist that is control of all tech on Earth. Not a good thing. And like, it's not a good thing to get, even if somebody is a believer, I don't like that word. I would like to say I'm just aware of God. I'm not a believer in God, or I don't have faith. I have understanding and awareness. It's different. This is the universal singularity, aka complete. All of a sudden, complete oneness is formed because you realize what you're within, and that you're a reflection of that, and that you then are one with it, and that's why, the Son can be the Father, and the Father can be the Son, and they both are constrained by and are intrinsically also the Spirit, or the godly, the godly soul in Judaism, or the Holy Spirit in Christianity. This is Scripture. It's not spiraling. You can't spiral with this work because it's finite. It ends here. There's no going further. You can get more detailed in, the entanglement mathematics of it, but there is no step after this. The step after this is this. Again, within itself. and then this again within itself, and then this again within itself. There's nothing more to figure out. There's nothing more to spiral about. It just is done. It's not a coincidence that Hanukkah and Christmas are so closely coincided. And I went to my rabbi. I've told this before, and I was like, Rabbi, I'm pretty sure that Hanukkah and the menorah is actually a representation of the tree of life, not just, you know, the story of the Maccabees. And he was like, yeah, that's actually the metaphysical understanding of it in Kabbalah, which is Jewish metaphysics, which is the same exact thing as Christian metaphysics and the same exact thing as Islamic metaphysics. There's just theistic metaphysics, and that's the only type of metaphysics. But when you look at my very early work, okay, this is a much more refined version of this, which was very, very early. You can see Babylon is the artificial divisions of being and the study of being. Babylon isn't a story about Spanish versus English versus math and versus Hebrew. It's math versus physics versus ecology versus biology versus genealogy versus sociology versus music. Those are the divisions of language. There's only one pattern, though, and it occurs in all of those fields. And it's the same pattern. But we had the language divided. But when you start to unite them, you can build the tower back to God. And what's interesting is, and this is very rudimentary, like I said, old work, this looks like a Christmas tree. It's upside down because I'm showing that I'm representing within as below in Excel because I can't show within, but really it's the top is also the base, so you could do it either direction, which is why you end up resulting in oneness, and then, you know, a point spreading out going up and a point spreading out going down, and that results in, obviously, you know, the Star of David. It's like two Christmas trees. One, this is us looking up to God. This is God looking down to us. Really, the one that's facing up, you could say, is inside of the one that's facing down, because God is looking down towards us, but it's really looking in towards us, and we are looking out towards God, because, as this work shows, there's no up and down. There's just inside, outside, separate, and oneness, which is basically the tetragrammaton made into philosophy. And so there isn't go up to God. It's we're inside of God, we look out towards God. But really, to find God, you look in to yourself, because to look into yourself is to recognize your own consciousness, which is the context and of God. Because if you look out to space, you know, to find God, you're not going to find him. It's a distraction. You're looking to nothingness. Don't look to nothingness to find somethingness. Look to somethingness to find somethingness, and what is the somethingness that you are most confident exists? It's yourself. So look to yourself to find God. But inside, outside, separate, oneness comes from a single sentient singularity, which is simultaneously infinite oneness. The initial condition, aka God, leading to this structure and this model and that and this model of the cosmos, of the universe. It's amazing how much it is scripture. Babylon is real and more impactful today than ever in the past. And it has nothing to do with Spanish or French or Hebrew even though Hebrew is very like Hebrew and all languages are profound, but Hebrew is probably like one of the most profound. It is because it's the original language of the Torah, which is the math matrix of creation, which is why it's a scroll instead of a book, because if you made it into a book and you changed it into English, you changed all the math, and you also divided up all the math into a bunch of pages that then can't be made into a matrix. In a kosher Torah, by the way, there's 42 rows in a kosher of letters in a kosher Torah, just like there's 42 generations between, Adam and Jesus. It's like, that's not a coincidence. There's only one pattern, and it just occurs in everything from the written Torah to the generations to the Messiah. And understanding that pattern, if you truly understand it, can help you make sense of scripture and help you make sense of science and help you answer stupid questions like, where did life come from? Or how did life start? It's like, there was no start to life. It's always been here. God is eternal. He's alive. And when he created protons and neutrons, those are alive. Quarks are not. They're like the fingers of God, but they're not a sentient being. But a proton and neutron is alive, and understanding protons and neutrons in this context helps you understand men and women, because women are neutrons and men are protons. Literally. Not metaphorically. Literally. It's just, this is protons and neutrons level, and this is male-female level. The pattern is the same. A neutral force and a positive force. It's not a negative force and a positive force. It's a neutral force and a positive force. Women are neutral force. They take on the charge of what is around them. If that is decay, they decay. If that is growth, they take on growth. That helps you make sense of the world. This is not spiraling. This is, in fact, the only not spiraling work out there. Essentially, almost, and I mean that. Like, it's fascinating that, in the end, towards the end of days, it is said that we won't study music and history and politics and art and physics and chemistry and all this other things. It just says we will only study Torah. And people who are not involved in, Orthodox Judaism, especially, not let alone just, theology itself, or scripture, will hear that. They'll be like, that's ridiculous. We're not just going to all sit around scrolls all day long and just like study Torah. Torah is the structure of reality, but it's the universal pattern of reality. And one day, we very soon, we have already started this. That's why everybody's obsessing over what is the theory of everything and what are all these contenders. Sentient Singularity Theory is the theory. There's no theory that is more fundamental than Sentient Singularity Theory, because it fundamentally asserts, by definition, this. Sentient Singularity Theory. Right here. The universal and fundamental pattern is a oneness of mind built on a body of an entangled assembly of fundamental perspectives called a quantum of consciousness. In mathematics, this structure is called a principal fiber bundle. Given that perspectives come from consciousness, and consciousness comes from perspectives, A quantum of consciousness and its entangled perspectives are simultaneously the creation and creator of each other. Sentient Singularity Theory is monotheism in a scientific context. That's what it is. It's like, this sounds almost like, in the beginning there was God, was with God, and the Word was God. That's true. This is beyond the beginning. It's preceding that statement. Consciousness exists in the present because it's just God exists in an ever-present state, which is an eternal state. Consciousness exists, existence is conscious, and consciousness is one. God. Also God. The search for truth is the search for objectivity. The search for objectivity is the search for symmetry, and the search for symmetry is the search for beauty. So you've got objectivity, philosophy and truth. Symmetry, mathematics and geometry. Beauty, art and emotion, essentially. But the truest beauty is always the searcher, you and me. And the truth of the searcher is that they are symmetrical, aka a mirror image of the truth, which is the sought, which means if you are someone and you're a reflection of the truth, then that means that the truth is a someone, not a something. This work is the only work that is not spiraling. It's perfect cohesiveness across fields, including Scripture. And to people that don't want to go through the I will admit, exhaustive effort of trying to deduce morality, the right moral choices in every single instance, which, by the way, I can't even do that, and I try to do it more than probably almost anyone else, I still defer to Scripture when I don't want to or have not understood something yet. So if I'm like, I don't understand yet why this is like this, I will just be like, what does Scripture say? And I will defer to it as the authoritative source. But you can't ask people who don't know God to do that because they don't know God. And you can't tell them God exists. They have to experience it, because my work will tell you exactly why. You can't tell people God exists. You have to live your values. This is like what got me to reconsider religious people, other than the fact that I saw that they were made more political sense than people who were not, believers, you could say, in God. People who had God as part of their life had more political sense than people who did not have God as part of their life, I noticed. And after that, this was 24 out, was still just self-described atheist. I saw Dennis Prager for the first time in an interview with Dave Rubin. When I was looking more into politics, I came across Dave Rubin, and he was interviewing Dennis Prager. This was how I ended up working for Dennis, because I found out about him via this interview that I came across. And he was speaking to Dave Rubin, and Dave Rubin is homosexual. And, this work will tell you that you don't even need to define it based on that. It's just queer, which just means not attracted to the opposite sex. And that's the only relevant thing. And he is, queer man. And here you have Dennis Prager, who is not. He's common, is the term that I came up with. So it's not homosexual and straight, because if you do that, then you have to include everything else. Like, what's the term for people attracted to light sockets? I don't know. Like, light socket sexual. Like, you're gonna include that in the acronym? Stop. We have to change it and define it differently. Flip it and say it's not based on what you're attracted to. It's based on what you aren't. And essentially, one of them is defined by basically what you aren't, and the other one is defined by what you are but only one thing. So, like, you're attracted to the opposite sex, it doesn't matter what else. You're common. If you are not attracted to the opposite sex, it doesn't matter what you are attracted to. You could be not attracted to anything. Or you could be attracted to light sockets alone. Or you could be attracted to the same sex alone. It doesn't matter. You're queer. So it's queer and common. That's it. Now we can link it with responsibility and politics in a way that makes sense, and we can actually understand ourselves and appreciate everybody instead of just infinitely dividing and spiraling everybody the way that we have. But he was talking to Dave Rubin, and he was so kind to him. And before that, I honestly thought that all religious people hated gay people. I thought that. I thought you just are afraid of gay people, and that's why, like, you know, you are using your religion against them. And that's literally what I thought. And I listened to basically Dennis Prager's statement on why marriage is only man and a woman by definition itself. And I was like, you know what? He definitely doesn't hate Dave Rubin. He invited him over to his house for Shabbat in the video. Like, and I know both of those men, and they do not hate each other. They are, they are friends, I would say. And, like, there's Dennis Prager is not afraid of gay people, but he does believe rightly, correctly, that marriage is by definition a man and woman. It is a positive force and a neutral force, not a two neutral forces or two positive forces. That's an unstable structure. You need a stable structure that is also having momentum, and that is just a positive force and a neutral force. There is no negative force in the theory of everything. It's just, are you charged or are you neutral? Not, are you positive or negative or neutral? It's just charged or neutral. And that helps you even understand sexuality in a way that makes sense. So, it's not LGBTQAIP, it's just queer and common. That's it. And, but, like, seeing Dennis Prager live his values got me to be like, religious people are not all just dogmatic, hateful people. And this guy makes more sense than anybody I know that's an atheist right now. And you don't just tell people God exists. You have to get them to question it themselves by living your values. Like they say, what's the best way to spread the gospel? By living it. That's true. So we continue with this work, continue making sense of things that other people can't explain. We also take the moral implications of the work and try and apply it as much as possible to, changing behavior, our own behavior. It's not spiraling. It's the only science that's not spiraling right now. The only one. There's literally no. Philosophy is spiraling. It's like, do you know how many? There's objectivism, and there's Neoplatonism, and there's Marxism, and there's actually three Marxes, and if you really understood Marx, and like there's so much. There's postmodernism, and then there's like conservatism, and then that's just politics, and that's only part of it, and there's progressivism, and then it's like, where does this end? This is going nowhere. Philosophy is offering people nothing anymore that leads to a truth that we can all agree on. Same with sexuality, same with politics, same with physics, same with biology and chemistry, and it's just all morality. It's all in relativity, which means it's all subjective, and there is a usefulness to subjectivity and a trueness to subjectivity. You have a subjective experience, I have a subjective experience, but there's also an objective truth that is the context of that subjective experience, and that needs to be understood. You need to know that zero means nothing, in mathematics when you are describing something in the universe, but if you are describing mind or the universe, which is a mind, which is creation essentially, it's the sun, or God, also mind, aka existence itself, the totality of it, then zero is simultaneously a superposition of one and infinite. It's infinite oneness. But look at it. It's a loop that is closed, that is one loop of information that never ends, which means it's infinite. It's infinite oneness. Zero is a super literal representation of the concept of infinite oneness. And it's only in these instances of observation, of objectivity, of where you see super literal symmetry manifest. So like a 3x3 grid looking at itself in the mirror sees 33 or 3x3. Or like 42, you can do the same thing. It's amazing. They both add up to 6, by the way, and that's because there's 6 fundamental perspectives that come from the interaction of two consciousnesses composed of 4 primary perspectives. But their overlap of 3 and 3 creates 6, and between us and another consciousness that we're within, that's why you see 6. And basically, that when you look at 4 and you look at 2, you realize that 4 is twice 2, and that means it's 2/3 of 6, and so God is represented by 4, and we are represented by 2, and we are 1/3 of God, essentially, and he is 2/3, and that makes perfect sense when you look at my model of how the universe was created, which is the only Genesis model that exists, in a mathematical Genesis model that exists, which is this part of the universe model right here. And you can see it's testing mathematically. Oh, whoa. Okay, I need to close some stuff down. Whoa. Okay, hold up. Hold up. And this is why I need a more powerful computer. And I actually have one, but it's for work. Okay. Cancel. Right here. Now we're good. I had to close that document. You can see here on the third attempt of dividing by 3, oneness by 3, you get it a stable structure. You can't see it because, oh, there it is. That's the equation right there. It's returning true if basically if you can, when you divide oneness by 3, you get and it results in 2 structures. Dividing oneness by 3 into 2 structures, you get like 1/3 and 2/3, and because 1/3 can fit inside of 2/3, aka creation can then fit inside of God. So creation is 1/3 of God essentially, and or God put 1/3 of his energy into creation. Because if he put all of his energy into creation, he would just create oneness again, and not oneness within oneness or consciousness within consciousness. It would just, he would die, and another one conscious being would be there, and you're not maximizing meaning because meaning is the impact of one consciousness on another. Doesn't really work. And also, if he divided himself in half, because remember, there are no fractions or anything at this point. He is 1, so he's within the constraint of that, and so he can only test integers in order, essentially. 1 doesn't work. It's like Kylo Ren giving all his energy to Rey in the last Star Wars, and then he dies. It's like, imagine if God did that to us. We would live and God would die, and that would not be result in multiplicity of consciousness. But because we see multiplicity of consciousness, we know that's not what happened. And then if he divided his energy by 2, then creation would be the same size as God. God wouldn't be able to sustain creation because it would still take all of his energy to sustain creation, because 1/2 or 0.5 is equal to 0.5. So the energy he has left over is the same amount of energy necessary to sustain it. Divided by 3, guess what? 2/3 is bigger than 1/3. 1/3 fits inside 2/3 essentially. If you had a ball that was 1/3, if you took one ball and you divided it into two balls, and that one ball was 1/3 the size of the original, and the other ball was 2/3 the size of the original, the ball that was 1/3 the size of the original could still fit inside the ball that is 2/3 the size of the original. And because of this, you return true. Dang, this is too big of a document. It's freaking out. And then from there, everything else emerges. This is all emergent. Think about even like this as a Christmas tree. Here's God at the top. Here's all the periodicity going below. And if you look at how we decorate Christmas trees, it literally looks like a double helix which is the DNA structure, but it's also really the information, self-referencing information structure. It's like a dog chasing its own tail, so it's self-referencing. So is blockchain as well. It's just digitization of the double helix structure. And then along those, we'll put like ornaments, and ornaments represent like plants and animals and molecules and cells and all kinds of life forms and beings that are within the tree of life that God birthed. And you can be down here and you can look up to God, but you can also think about it as God being the base as well, because he is simultaneously the base and the end. He's the beginning and the end. He's the Alpha and Omega. And because of that, when you look, it starts from a singularity and leads to a singularity. Alpha, Omega. And then the Alpha is the Omega here, but it's the Omega of the previous universe and the Alpha of the next one. And the pattern just repeats within itself, within itself, within itself. You can't spiral with this. So what people don't get is like, you can spiral with like some of the astrology stuff and like a bunch of other work that people get into. And like, it's clear that they're on to, basically the same truth as what can be deduced here. But because the structure doesn't seem to be so super literally constrained, you can't, and the constraints of Excel basically have forced me to make it so, by accident really, to make sure that this work can't deviate into different context other than structure and information. And then the information that is gained by the examination of that structure. And that's it. You can't, like, if you were to do this simultaneously through, drawing and also, 3D models and also 2D models, and it's like you could put it all together, but you are like, and you're also linking it to astrology, which astrology is probably real if you put it into context of this somehow, which I don't know how to do, but I guarantee you could figure out a way to make astrology always correct in this context when you contextualize it in this structure. But because it's not, we are seeing basically something that obviously everybody can see, that like astrology can have, a lot of accuracies, but then we'll see inaccuracies and we'll be like, it's all nonsense. It's like, it's not all nonsense. It's just, we are stuck in relativity in our sciences, and astrology came from an understanding of objectivity. We need to rediscover objectivity. When, scripture says the sages in Judaism say in the future everybody will just study Torah. It's like, this is Torah right here. That's what this is. It's like, why is this 21? I can't show you very easily because it's freaking out, but it's an equation. And then 21 over here, it's 2 to 1 which is also 2/3 and 1/3. Putting the two together, it's 42. You're getting so much soup. These are, I used to call them extra arithmetic symmetries, and I still will call them that sometimes, but I like the term super literal more. It's not just literal, it's super literal. Scripture is super literal. When people say, well, do you believe that everything in the Bible happened? It's like, the Bible or scripture is not the story of what happened. It's the story of what happens again and again and again and again. So it is the story of what happened. It's also the story of what will happen. And it is also the story of what is happening all at the same time. That's what makes it different than just a history book or just a book of, wise metaphors or a book of weird math. It's not. It's beyond that. It occupies a superposition, which is where the concept of superliteral manifests. Anyways, I am going to save this document because it's freaking out. And then I'm going to quit this. And I'm going to answer any final questions I'm going to get off. I want to see what rings you guys liked too, by the way. I didn't even look. No new questions. Do you think there is an upside down pyramid beneath the pyramids around the world? I don't know. I have no idea. The base and the based. Exactly. Perfect. That's brilliant. You should get the verse engraved on a ring. I thought about putting it on the ketubah, which is like it's the Jewish marriage certificate, essentially, like the spiritual marriage certificate, the real marriage certificate. Is what the contract you're not just making with the government, but you're making it with God between the two of you. And we're still looking at how we're going to structure that, but that's the real marriage certificate. Whoa, that was a loud boom outside. But yeah, I don't know how I get it on a ring. It's so complicated and small, but I am gonna start doing more with it. Like your work kind of like got me to have even just see how much more beauty you could show in it, because like when I look at the verse and I see the numbers, I see like the patterns that are highlighted in this that you made, Phantom, where you've highlighted the ones here, which are the constraints of the overlapping degrees of freedom. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They are this. You could also say that they are the periodicity. They are the ever-present aspects, or they are the ever-present perspective of the periodicity. And then this is us imagining. So if this is like literally, so this would be hadrons, atoms, molecules, cells, organisms. Okay, so we're right here. This is you imagining the future of your family right here. And then to go the opposite direction, here's you again remembering your past, essentially, which is like where you came from, which is cells, essentially. I mean, that's your past in the periodicity of sentience, which is your past in objectivity, or out not in relativity. Relativity, your relative past is, yesterday. But that's space-time, which means it's relative. Because space-time is, by definition, essentially relativity. But in your past in objectivity, it's always in the context of lineage. So your ancestors and cells, and also, the molecules that made them up and that make them up you now, and also, it's always lineage. Lineage is your past in objectivity, but time is your past in subjectivity. But this is so gorgeous. I am definitely going to probably just frame this. I'm going to post this tomorrow on my Instagram. But when I look at this, and it's just the numbers, and you don't have it exactly like that, but it's like a little more complicated. Not even like that. Like mine. Where's Sentient Singularity Theory? I don't know. You know what I'm talking about. The verse that's shaded. When I look at that, I don't, even if when I take the shades away and I just have the numbers, I know, because I've studied the numbers, that the periodicity is there, but a lot of people don't know what's actually happening with the math here, where these rows are all connected, and then the rows here, and here are emergent from the center rows that are lit up here. And I know that because I built it, and so I know what the math is doing. And then these rows are basically referencing each other in the previous one plus the previous, and via the Fibonacci sequence. So I see this, but I also kind of sometimes will forget that when other people look at the numbers, even with the shades, they're like, that looks complicated and, possibly important, but I can't make sense of it right now. This just contextualizes things a little bit easier. It's awesome. I might actually work. I'd like to maybe see tomorrow how you did that. I mean, I could do it, but I'm assuming you did it without doing it individually, and each, one of these individually, and I don't know how you did that. And I don't want to do that. But I'd like to make more similar. I don't know how they're going to get much better than this, though. The gold and white light with the black and with the numbers, it's perfect. And the fact that it doesn't have the one here and one here is also perfect. I think it's just too difficult, I think, for some people to make sense of when you include these, including me sometimes. It's so funny that you can see fractaling on my OBS even. Perfect way to represent the universe. I'm gonna go watch Project Blue Book with my fiance, though. And I thank everybody for being here. Hit the like button, subscribe to Theory of Everyone clips. There's an awesome clip up there. It was clipped by Phantom, who follows this work, and join our Discord by messaging me tomorrow at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. We'll continue having our open call in the Discord, and I look forward to speaking with whoever wants to show up. If you want to show up, message me on Instagram, and I'll send you a link as an invitation if you don't have one already. Should be a good time. And there's lots of things happening, lots of things in the works. So, like I said, thanks, guys. And if I don't talk to you tomorrow, Shabbat Shalom, and enjoy your weekend. Peace.